A man stands on a wooden box in the middle of a muddy town square. He holds a pamphlet in his hand, its pages trembling slightly. Close on the trembling pages. His voice is not loud, but it is clear. He speaks of a king far across the ocean. He speaks of taxes that feel like theft. He speaks of a government that does not listen. A crowd gathers, some nodding, others looking over their shoulders. A soldier in a red coat watches from a distance, hand on musket. In this moment, every word is a risk. Every sentence could land this man in a dark, cold jail. Speaking your mind was an act of courage. It was a time before a promise was made. At the heart of this new nation's promise is a single, powerful sentence. It is just 45 words long. But these words contain a universe of liberty. They are the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. They lay out 5 basic freedoms that belong to every citizen. These are not gifts from the government. They are rights that the government is forbidden from taking away. The sentence begins with a clear command: Congress shall make no law. It is a line drawn in the sand, a limit placed on power from the very start. It is the bedrock of what it means to be a free person in a free society. The first freedom is about religion. It says the government cannot create a national church or force you to believe in something you do not. It also says the government cannot stop you from practicing your own faith. This was a radical idea. In the old world, kings and queens dictated how people should worship. Wars were fought over it. The founders wanted a country where your conscience was your own. You could be a Baptist, a Catholic, a Jew, or have no faith at all. Your spiritual life was a private matter, separate from the business of the state. This created a space for diverse beliefs to exist side by side. To understand why these 45 words were so important, we must look back at the world they came from. The American colonies were ruled by Great Britain, and in Britain, the king held immense power. There were laws against seditious libel, which made it a crime to publish anything that criticized the government. The truth was not a defense. If you printed something that embarrassed a powerful official, you could be thrown in prison, even if what you wrote was completely true. This created a culture of fear for writers and printers who were the main source of news and ideas for the public. One famous case from this era was that of John Peter Zenger in 1735. Zenger was a printer in New York. He published a newspaper that was critical of the colonial governor, William Cosby. Zenger's paper accused Cosby of being corrupt and incompetent. Cosby was furious and had Zenger arrested for seditious libel. At the trial, Zenger's lawyer, Andrew Hamilton, did something radical. He admitted that Zenger had printed the articles, but he argued that the jury should find Zenger not guilty if the words he printed were true. This was a revolutionary idea at the time. The jury agreed, and Zenger was set free. The Zenger case sent a shockwave through the colonies. It was a victory for the idea that truth should be a defense against charges of libel. But it did not change the law. It was just one jury's decision. The threat of punishment for speaking out still loomed large. After the Revolution, the leaders of the new United States gathered in 1787 to write a constitution. This document was the blueprint for a new federal government. It laid out the powers of the president. It laid out the powers of Congress. It laid out the powers of the courts. But something was missing. The Constitution, as originally written, did not include any specific promises about individual rights. It focused on the structure of government, not the freedoms of the people. This became a major point of conflict, sparking one of the most important debates in American history. It was a battle of ideas between two groups: the Federalists, the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists, led by Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, supported the new Constitution. They argued a strong central government was necessary to hold the young country together. They believed the Constitution itself was a Bill of Rights because it created a government with limited specific powers. If the government was not given the power to control the press, they argued, then it did not need a specific amendment saying it could not. They worried listing certain rights might imply those were the only rights people had. They thought it better to leave it unsaid, trusting the structure of the new government to protect liberty. The task of drafting the Bill of Rights fell to a man who had at first been skeptical of the idea, James Madison. Madison was a Federalist. He had played a central role in writing the Constitution itself. Initially, he shared the Federalist view that a Bill of Rights was unnecessary. He called it a parchment barrier, believing that written words alone could not stop a government determined to abuse its power. He thought the structure of the government, with its checks and balances, was a better protection for liberty, showing the executive, showing the judicial. But he was also a practical politician who, well, listened to the people. Madison saw that the demand for a Bill of Rights was strong and widespread. He knew the new government needed the trust and support of the citizens to succeed. He also heard from his friend Thomas Jefferson, who was in Paris at the time. Jefferson wrote to Madison, urging him to support a Bill of Rights. He argued it would give the people a clear legal standard to hold their government accountable. Convinced by these arguments and the political reality, Madison changed his mind. He promised the people of his home state, Virginia, that if elected to the first Congress, he would make a Bill of Rights his top priority. True to his word, once elected to the House of Representatives in 1789, Madison went to work. He sifted through the hundreds of amendments that had been proposed by the different states. He organized them. He refined them, and he presented a concise list to Congress. He drew inspiration from documents like Virginia's Declaration of Rights, written by George Mason. Section 6. The words become law. After Congress approved the 12 amendments, they were sent to the states for ratification. For an amendment to become part of the Constitution, 3/4 of the states must approve it. This was a slow process in a time of horse-drawn carriages and handwritten letters. It took more than 2 years for the states to debate and vote on the proposed amendments. One by one, the state legislatures considered the list. There was little controversy over the amendments we now know as the Bill of Rights. They were, after all, what many states had demanded in the first place. On December 15, 1791, Virginia became the 11th state to ratify 10 of the 12 amendments. With Virginia's vote, the 3/4 requirement was met. The Bill of Rights was officially part of the Constitution. The 45 words of the First Amendment were now the law of the land. The promise was sealed. Section 7. Testing the limits. For more than 100 years, the First Amendment remained mostly quiet. It was a principle, but not one that was often tested in the nation's highest court. That began to change in the 20th century. World wars, social movements, people began to ask new questions about what freedom of speech really meant. The Supreme Court was forced to step in and draw lines. One of the first major tests came during World War I. A man named Charles Schenck was arrested for distributing leaflets that urged young men to resist the military draft. He argued he was just exercising his freedom of speech. The Supreme Court disagreed. In the 1919 case Schenck vs. United States, the court said that not all speech is protected. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. wrote that speech that creates a clear and present danger is not protected by the First Amendment. He used a famous example. The most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man in falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. This clear and present danger test became the standard for many years. It meant that the government could restrict speech if it believed that speech could lead to immediate harm or violence. But the court's thinking continued to evolve. In 1969, during the Vietnam War, the court heard the case of a Ku Klux Klan leader who had given a speech at a rally. Section 8. The freedom to disagree. The First Amendment does not just protect popular ideas. It protects the ideas we hate. It gives us the right to disagree, loudly and publicly. This principle has been tested time and again in some of the most difficult cases the Supreme Court has ever faced. In 1977, a group of American Nazis wanted to march through Skokie, Illinois, a town where many Holocaust survivors lived. The town tried to stop them, passing laws to prevent the march. The American Civil Liberties Union, a group known for defending free speech, took the case, arguing that even hateful speech is protected by the First Amendment. The courts agreed. They ruled that the government cannot ban speech simply because the ideas are offensive. This is a core principle of American free speech. The answer to bad speech is not censorship, but more speech. Section 9. A legacy to protect. From a man on a wooden box in a muddy square to a digital world of instant communication, the journey of the First Amendment is the story of America itself. It is a story of struggle, of debate, and of the constant effort to live up to a profound ideal. Those 45 words, born from a fear of silence, have become the nation's loudest and most enduring promise. They are not just words on an old piece of paper. They are the air that a free society breathes. They give us the power to question, the right to believe, and the freedom to become who we are. But this freedom is not a gift that, once given, can be forgotten. It is a responsibility. It requires active participation from every citizen. It demands that we tolerate ideas we find repellent. It asks us to listen to voices we would rather ignore. It challenges us to engage in difficult conversations, to seek out the truth, and to hold our leaders accountable. The First Amendment is not self-enforcing. It lives and dies with our willingness to defend it, not just for ourselves, but for those with whom we disagree most profoundly.